All right. What's going on, everybody? How are we doing? Welcome here, Friday, January 17th. But welcome to today's YouTube Live. How's everyone doing today? Here we are. It's my final day in California. Then I'm heading back to the dead of winter in Canada. So I am enjoying some last little bit of sunshine. If you guys are watching this live, let me know where you're tuning in from. If you are watching this live, you guys, let me know where you guys are tuning in from. I would love to hear from you in the chat section. Any questions you guys have, anything you want to ask me, anything that's in your space, feel free to include that in the chat section. Today, we're going to be talking about generational relational patterns, ending karmic relational patterns. So if you guys have any questions or anything that is alive in your space that you want me to sort of riff off, you want me to sort of jam on or answer your questions, feel free to put whatever question or anything that you have in your space in the chat section. So any questions, you guys, feel free to include it in the chat section. Should I go hat backwards? Oh, yeah, that's better. Hat backwards. I think we're going to roll with that. Look at that. Okay. All right, guys. So today's topic, what was I talking about today? So today's topic was ending generational relational patterns. So this is going to kind of feed off a little bit of what I talked about, I think, as sort of thinking about what I want to talk about today, where I want to kind of go with this. It's going to feed a little bit off of what I was sort of jamming about last time. If you tuned into the live last week, I was sort of talking about what this new cycle represents. I was talking about, so again, I'm not huge into numerology, but we are moving into a year 9. So 2025. So it's 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 5 is a year 9. And so if we want to think about a year 9, it's sort of this idea of like a bridge. Maybe 50% is like completing what we're sort of moving away from. 50% is completing certain contracts, wrapping things up, completing certain sort of karmic cycles. And then the other 50% is what we're stepping into, right? So half this year is sort of, okay, what are we sort of wrapping up? What are we sort of completing? What is sort of spirit, divine, the God? What is spirit asking us to finally put a period or an exclamation point on in our life, right? And so as this relates to this, what sort of relational patterns is spirit really telling you? Is spirit really saying to you, this is not going to happen anymore? This is the end of this cycle. This is the end of this pattern. And then conversely, as sort of the bridge, right? So when we think about like a year 9 is we're trying to bridge into like a year 1, meaning what are we trying to complete so that we can finally move into a space of creating something that has never existed before, right? And I always think of the divine. The way that I always interpret the divine is creation. The divine is always creation energy. So when we think about how do we move into the divine, or more of like a God frequency, or more into like a spirit frequency, whatever you want to call it, the question that I always ask is, are you creating something that has never existed before, or are you recreating something that is really familiar? Are you creating something that has never existed before, or are you recreating something that is really, really familiar? So that's sort of the question that we pose when it comes to moving into the divine, right? We're asking ourselves, like, how much are we creating versus how much are we recreating? And the thing is, you guys, that we're always doing one of two things. We're either recreating something that's familiar, or we're creating something that's unprecedented, right? So we're either recreating something that is familiar, or we are creating something that is unprecedented. So when we really think about like a year 9 moving, so 2026 is going to be a year 1. So really this year is about wrapping up what we need to wrap up. And I kind of call this year sort of a bridge year, because it's going to be, what are we wrapping up? And then also, what are we stepping into? So if we want to think about what kind of 2025 might represent from like a numerology sort of standpoint, in terms of that sort of spiritual way, it's what are we having to wrap up and complete? What are we having to be like, okay, I keep fucking doing this. This keeps happening. This is like a familiar sort of piece. And what are we being asked to step into? Um, hey, Jamie, Han from Belgium here. Just purged my brains out in the last 24 hours with the puke bucket, stepping into a new me. Okay, I love it. I love it. And so, what I really wanted to talk about here, and what I want this live to really sort of be about, is that, and I get asked this question a lot, you guys. How do we know if something's generational, and how do we know if something's ours? And this is a very, very simple way that I can break it down. So every single thing, every single pattern, for the most part, particularly relationally, that happens in your life, there's going to be something. For example, say you're a woman and your pattern is to choose men where you feel contained. So maybe as a woman, you feel that you can't move into your ultimate power. Say you're like this really sort of witchy, sort of oracle, sort of feminine being, but you can't move into like your divine power. And so you have this oppressing sort of energy in relationships in your lifetime, in your very tangible three-dimensional relationship sort of in your lifetime, where maybe it feels like the men you're with are not as powerful as you, or it feels that men that you're with can't hold the totality of your oracle, right? So whatever sort of story that you're sort of living, that, no man can really see me and hold all of me. And so maybe the story that you've held for your lifetime is that you have to be contained. You have to like contain your sort of feminine being to be able to match the masculine, right? And so this is a very tangible sort of three-dimensional thing that has happened, that is happening or happened in your lifetime, in your relational patterns. But I guarantee you, there is a generational, there is an ancestral origin of this pattern. So, for example, that story is perhaps that the feminine has to be contained in order to match the masculine, right? So obviously, like a story is basically, we're all storytellers, and the story that we tell ourselves comes from some origin of trauma, some origin of break in connection, some origin of a lack of safety, some origin of self-abandonment, or that our reality as a being, as a person, is not allowed, or it's not allowed to live true through us, right? So whatever your pattern is, there's going to be a generational origin. There's going to be a generational origin. So if you're a woman who chooses relationships where the masculine can't meet me, I guarantee that pattern, it could go back 47 generations. It could go back 3 generations. It could go back 10 generations. What is coming up in your body right now has a generational origin. I'm going to repeat that. What is coming up right now, I guarantee you, has a generational origin. So when people always ask, how does like your shit and your ancestor stuff work? Well, almost always with whatever we deal with in our lifetime has ancestral origins and imprints, right? And for example, say a woman always has to be contained. That could be revealed three-dimensionally in this lifetime through her relationship with her father, that she now has to contain her feminine energy to match sort of the energetic imprint of dad. Because if she expands beyond dad, if her feminine energetic power expands beyond dad, now her safety is questioned, right? Now her safety is questioned. And now, if she were to expand, if the feminine were to energetically expand beyond the imprint of dad, now what happens is all the ancestral energy, all the ancestral fears. So what is coming up in your body right now is ancestral. As we move into this year 9, what is happening is all these ancestral contracts are being asked to be completed. So I'm going to repeat that again. As we move into a year 9, it is all these ancestral karmic contracts that are being asked to be completed. The really big, and you guys have heard me, if you've tuned into these lives, something like a really common theme, if I had to break it down to what have I been talking a lot about recently, and I would probably say it's sitting in your unworthiness. sitting in your deepest unworthiness, right? And we talked a lot about sitting in your deepest unworthiness, sitting in your deepest ancestral unworthiness. And so this is the relational piece to it. And so probably what you might have witnessed is all these sort of relational patterns are coming to the surface, right? So through all this unworthiness, probably all your relational patterns, all the ways, maybe the inner love addict, all the ways that you maybe have used masculine energy or used feminine energy, not been in true reverence of your polarity, all the ways that you have been codependent, all the ways that you have not been in your total sovereignty and wholeness relationally is going to be revealed through all of this. So as this deepest sort of ancestral unworthiness that is coming through, unworthiness is always the bridge, right? And so what you're going to notice a lot, is we're being invited. Can you sit with that unworthiness that is coming up? Can you sit in that unworthiness that is coming up? Because the unworthiness is the bridge between your death and your revolution. As we move into a year 9 is like a simultaneous death and revolution. If we want to think of a year 1 as a total revolution, year 9 is a death/revolution. This last year that we just went through in sort of a year 8, 2024, I would say was a complete death. What I was sort of getting was a lot of people had a really, really hard time in 2024. As if we thought the pandemic wasn't enough. A lot of people had a real hard time in 2024. What was happening was all these generational origins were really, really beginning to come to the surface. So whatever that generational origin was, it's beginning to come to the surface. And I'm going to give you guys an example of how this plays out, okay? I'm going to give you guys an example. So say, and I don't mean to be really dire in the example that I use, but this is just what's coming into my space right now. Say 4 generations back. And a lot of the work that I do is pinpointing ancestral origin trauma to be able to clear ancestral energy, to be able to move out of recreation and move the body into a space of creation, to be able to like know your divine potential. So say 4 generations back, and say it's on the paternal side. Say it's your so 4 generations back, right? So we're 1, our parents are 2, our grandparents are 3, our great grandparents are 4. So 4 generations back is the great grandparent lineage. And so say the trauma is coming on the right side of the body. So if the trauma is coming on the right side of the body, 4 generations back, we know we're dealing with the paternal lineage. And so say we're dealing with our great grandmother, which is going to be our father's grandmother. Say we're dealing with our great grandmother, and say that our great grandmother experienced rape or experienced some type of abuse. So what's really common, for example, with sexual abuse, rape, molestation, again, apologize guys that I'm using a very dire example. It's what's coming in my space. What's really common when we have sexual trauma is going to be the word disgust. So disgust, for example, when a client has the word disgust, that's really big in their space. And I'm kind of leading you guys a little bit to how I work. But when someone says disgust, when you know the example when someone's like skin crawls and disgust. When someone says disgust, I typically know that we're dealing with another lifetime. When someone has the word disgust, I typically know we're dealing with another lifetime. Usually when there's disgust, we're usually dealing with some type of sexual trauma, some type of molestation, rape, sexual inappropriateness, disgust. And this is not always but this is probably most often when we have the word disgust in our space, we're dealing with generational sexual abuse. When disgust is really prevalent and really pronounced in our space, we are most often dealing with generational sexual trauma, okay? So say the origin is 4 generations back, paternal side, so great-grandmother on our father's side. Now, everything in our lifetime relationally, the karmic contract relationally is all to fuel disgust. Everything fuels disgust. So I'll give you the example, how would disgust play out? Disgust might play out with we do things that fuel our own inner shame. Means we act out of integrity, we do things that we self-abandon, we self-sabotage, We, again, act out of integrity. We do things that fuel sort of this inward sort of disgust with ourself, right? So because when we come from sexual trauma, sexual abuse, usually what happens is the story is that it's our fault, right? That we could have controlled it, that we're not worth something, that it's something wrong with us. Obviously, even though we were a victim in the situation or generationally. And this might even be the case, you guys, if nothing happened to us. But the way that that generational contract gets passed down is through the word disgust, through the word disgust. And the way that disgust might play out in your life is it might result in addiction. It might result in different ways to avoid being with yourself. It may involve getting relationally involved with people who don't revere you, don't respect you, people who treat you poorly, people who don't respect your boundaries, right? So disgust gets played out that you self-abandon, that you self-sabotage, and maybe you're with someone who fuels this pattern of you being disgusted with yourself, that there's something wrong with me. Even what might happen is this other person that you're with, this partner might get turned on by your disgust. They might get turned on by your disgust. And they might even just prey and sort of predicate on that. And so how this generationally gets passed down is in the word disgust. So maybe your great-grandmother on your father's side was raped, or she was molested, or she experienced something, some type of real severing with the masculine, right? Shows up on the right side of the body. You can't trust men. You have sort of this story, yada, yada, yada. The way generationally that gets passed down is disgust. What do you guys think is going to be underneath the word disgust? It's going to be all your unworthiness. It's going to be all your pain. It's going to be all your pain. What actually happens too, when we're powerful spiritual beings, the ego sort of tells us that I won't be able to, and this happens sometimes, I won't be able to be in my power without this word disgust. That I won't be anything without disgust. Because generationally, for 4 generations back, we've identified the word disgust has been passed down without this sort of inward relationship, being disgusted with ourselves at some level, and it's always living unconsciously. Without this word, who am I? I don't have any sort of value. So your whole life's work becomes, how do I avoid having to feel what's underneath this disgust? How do I avoid feeling what's underneath this unworthiness, right? So what happens is we make a survival adaptation. We make a survival adaptation. Oh, I'm going to be the caretaker for everyone. I'm going to take care of everyone. I'm going to do everything for everyone. I'm going to find value and worthiness in some way that's going to be a projection from that wound, from that ancestral wound. So what's coming up right now in your space? Say you have this word disgust playing out. So what's coming up is the unworthiness that lives below that disgust. So what's actually coming up is the ancestral origin from 4 generations back, where your great-grandmother was molested, or she was raped, or she was abused by the masculine. Whatever lives underneath that disgust is coming up, right? That is what's coming up. So whatever your story is, I use this story as an example of great-grandmother on the paternal side was raped, abused, or molested, and how that probably will show up in you is through the word disgust. Like I said, disgust usually means generational sexual trauma. That's usually what it means, this idea where our skin is crawling. And so this gets played out through your lifetime through this word, where basically you continue to relate relationally. Karmically, you continue to have situations with men or women that fuel that word of disgust. And so what happens when you pinpoint the ancestral origin of that, you can realize, and this is what I do with my clients, that you can realize where this ancestral origin is of great-grandmother was molested, that great-grandmother experienced this sort of big T trauma that has now been passed down through the word disgust. And what happens is the ego needs to self-preserve. The ego needs to do everything that we can to preserve the word disgust, because without the word disgust, we're nothing. If we don't feel disgusted with ourselves, we're nothing. We're a piece of shit. Isn't that weirdly counterintuitive? Like, if all of a sudden I'm not disgusted with myself, then all of a sudden that's not safe. So the way that we self-preserve is through the word of being self-disgusted. And how that plays out relationally is we're going to choose partners and karmic situations that continue to perpetuate the ego's identification with that word disgust. Maybe we even experience our own sort of sexual trauma or put ourselves in sort of these promiscuous positions that fuel this. And what happens, you guys, is when we hold on to these generational origins, and this is really, really important, is that we start to relate to partners through shadow. We start to relate to partners through shadow. So think about this, you guys. When we're holding these massive sort of ancestral origin, generational sort of wounds, and we select. So say your great grandmother was molested or she was raped, and you hold that in your body. You hold that in your body. Then all of a sudden you're scrolling Instagram. You're like, oh my God, I'm so fucking attracted to this person. You start talking to them. You start DMing. You're like, holy shit. We're drawn to each other for Jamie. We're drawn to each other from another life. This is the love of my fucking life. But you're holding this generational wound where your great grandmother was raped and molested. Maybe 47 generations back, the oracles and the witches of your lineage were stoned by the masculine. And you choose from here. And you choose from this generational wound. What is coming up right now is this generational wound relationally. What is coming up right now is this generational wound relationally. So when you choose from that generational wound and you're like, oh my God, I've met the love of my life. This is often what twin flames are. Twin flames are often coming into your space to heal a generational ancestral karmic contract. So twin flames, I call these trauma bonds of the quantum field. So the quantum field's kind of all of this. So how I relate to the quantum field is the generational space and the past life space. This is the quantum realm. This is the quantum field. It's all related to what opens your crown, right? So when you have this generational origin sort of wound, great grandmother was raped, and the way this holds in your body is through the word disgust. I am disgusted with myself. And you might not even be aware that you're holding this wound, but this could also live in your inability to be able to take care of yourself. What you do is you partake in destructive behavior that doesn't sort of support your own sort of well-being and health, whatever it might. And again, that might be through addiction, or that might be through just other sort of destructive patterns, or doing things that you know are not good for you because it's fueling that word of disgust, which is generational origin. And so when you choose a partner, and I did an example on Instagram of like, you're choosing from this, you're choosing from this. And so what's happening right now and what has been happening in 2024 is your choices from this. And when I say that this is your trauma that is interwoven with your intuition. So what's happening, 2024, 2025, the most karmic, the most energetically and emotionally charged ways that we have recreated are coming up for review. The most energetically, emotionally ways that we have recreated are coming up for review. What that means in a very practical level is the generational cycle is now being exposed. The generational cycle is now being exposed. So think a twin flame is when your trauma and your intuition chooses like this, right? Your spiritual power, how powerful of a spiritual being you will become, and your capacity to channel and live as the divine offering is going to be your ability to separate your trauma and your intuition to this, right? When you're here and your trauma and your intuition separate, now you're creating. Now you're creating something that has never existed before, because you're seeing the trauma channel and the intuition channel. But what happens before you can move into this, the most karmic and energetically and emotionally charged ways that we have done this means that our trauma generationally has been interwoven with our intuition comes up for review. So if you're someone, and Han was just saying that she was purging, that, there was nausea coming in her space, whatever it might have been, the deepest layers of this are all coming. So what happens as you go through a spiritual initiation or a rite of passage that is being guided and directed by spirit through you, the way the catalyst is relationally, all the deepest karma and trauma, where your trauma has been interwoven with your intuition through the lineage, is going to come up for review. And so if you have this generational wound where maybe your great grandmother was molested or raped, as I mentioned, you're going to now what you're trying to do, very simply put, is go from this to this. And what do you guys think happens as you try to separate your trauma from your intuition? What do you guys think happens when you try to separate your trauma from your intuition to go like this? So a bunch of things happen. For one, entities come out of the woodworks. When you're trying to go from this to this, what you're going to notice is, oh my God, I keep getting, why is this person my ex-boyfriend from 5 years ago just messaged me out of nowhere? Well, guess what they're sensing? They're sensing that you're about to take a leap to this. That ex from 5 years ago is sensing something is fucking happening inside of her, where she is healing this karma. And dark energy, entity energy prays when we're about to take a leap from karma to the divine. We're about to go from dark to the light. That's where the karmic energy, the cockroaches in the corner, they're trying to pull you back into that vibration. They're trying to pull you back into that way of relating. And what's happening now in the world as we move, we're in a year 9 in 2025, is we're going to notice a big split. We're going to notice a split. More people are moving into the light, where more people are moving into deeper karmic trenches. More and more people are fighting and resisting. Their ego is fighting against what's happening right now. And if you clue into the patterns of what's happening, as this generational energy is trying to integrate through you, you no longer have to fight and be in so much resistance and actually suffer. That you can actually move into a whole new vibration. That's how your trauma goes from this to this, right? And think about what happens when you're trying to heal this is the most amount of pressure is going to come up. The most amount of karma is going to come up. The most amount of unworthiness is going to come up, because it's like this. It's like here, and then it's getting really all this pressure so that it can finally separate and untangle. And now what happens in this space is you begin to see clearly. You can separate your trauma from the voice of God. And now you're moving into a vibration where you're like, oh, this is really empowering for me. This is really, really fucking empowering for me. I made this choice and I moved in this space. This is really, really good for me. And you start to understand how the divine works in a way that you haven't been able to work it before. But what it takes is this, the pressure fucking mounts. Your deepest unworthiness. Jamie, I'm a piece of shit. I'm never going to amount to anything. All of a sudden, all this karma. If you think about the last 6 months of 2024, think about the amount of unworthiness that was coming up in your space. Think about the amount of challenges that maybe arose. Maybe what you notice is this propensity towards self-soothing and self-comfort activity started to activate. Maybe you're noticing that whatever your relational patterns were started to exasperate. Whatever your relational karma was started to get really clear. And what happens when a pattern's about to shift? When something is about to shift, you get as uncomfortable as you've ever been. You guys hear that? When a pattern is about to shift, you get as uncomfortable as it's ever been. And the reason being why you get as uncomfortable as you've ever been is because now you're seeing it in a different way. You're relating to it so clearly, so soberly, that you can't avoid and you can't deny what you're seeing. It's right there. It becomes undeniable in your space. It's staring at you and it's glaring at you and you can't deny it, right? As we say that, when we're in denial, now we can't deny what's coming. What this means is something's about to shift. As I've talked about, as I relate an awakening to an initiation, what happens in awakening is we start to see. When you think about going through a spiritual awakening, you're beginning to see something. You're beginning to observe something. The initiation is the embodiment of what you see. So when it comes relationally, maybe you start to see something. Maybe you keep going back and back to that relationship that you know is not good for you. And what might happen is you get to a place where it becomes so uncomfortable how bad it is for you that you literally cannot go back anymore, and it becomes undeniable that something has to shift. This is why that I always say spirituality and spiritual initiations, there's no avoiding the way that you shift spiritually is through suffering. The way that you shift spiritually is through suffering. There is no way of avoiding this. And so what might have happened in 2024, your suffering started to increase. And what will happen is people can either stay in the suffering long enough for this to break into this, or they continue to stay in a karmic contract. They continue to stay in a karmic pattern. What happens is if your great-grandmother was raped or abused or molested, that you continue to fuel in the patterns of disgust, of self-disgust. This is what you might notice even at a collective level in the world, as there's going to continue to be sort of collective trauma, global trauma. Shit's going to continue to happen all around you. Because what's happening, even as we relate to this spiritually, is karma is trying to come to a head. Karma is trying to come to a head. If you are chosen, if you are called to step into the new light vibration at this particular time, things are going to become more clear than they've ever been. Things are going to become more clear than they've ever been. And so right before a pattern's about to shift, you're going to suffer the most that you've ever suffered. Right before a pattern is about to shift, you're going to suffer more than you've ever suffered. The problem is, and the piece that I always talk about, people don't stay in it long enough to get to the breakthrough. People don't sit in the breakdown long enough to get to the breakthrough. So what you're being asked to do is to be able to be in a breakdown long enough for the breakthrough to occur. The reason why this has been so challenging is because you're not just dealing with your lifetime. You're dealing with a generational contract that is coming up for review through you. You're dealing with this generational contract that is coming up through your body. Relationally, it is looking at the ways that your unworthiness, the ways that a generational pattern has lived through you to play out these generational contracts in ways that you recreate relationally, and you don't create something unprecedented. You're being asked to create something unprecedented. That is what sacred union is. You move into a vibration of sacred union when you heal generational, karmic, generational, ancestral contracts in your body through your unworthiness, and move into a space where those relational karmic contracts, finding the origin, healing it through you so you can move into something brand new. When you heal that, you move onto a vibration and a plane of sacred union. I keep talking about sacred unions are coming, but only if you do this clearing. Everyone wants a sacred union. Everyone wants that polarity, that sexy sort of spiritual relationship where it feels this infinite sort of loveness, that we've known each other from another time, that we can create this new vibration, new frequency of new earth. But people don't understand the amount of death internally through your own individual rite of passage that you have to move through. The amount of ancestral generational karma that you have to heal through you. You have to find the origin in the quantum realm of the ancestors that persist this story of why you can't be in your relational sovereignty, of why you can't be in your relational power, of why you can't be in a space of wholeness. What happens is people come up to the edge. They come up to that unworthiness. And what happens is they move back into self-soothing and coping mechanisms. They move back into the low-hanging fruit. They move back into the karmic recreation. Think about it. People get out of a relationship and think about how seldom people actually deal with the origin of that trauma. Think about how often people go through a breakup. They're single for a month and then they get back on a dating app and then start dating and dating and dating rather than actually dealing with the origin of what brought them to that particular dynamic to begin with. If you don't deal with the origin of that particular dynamic, you create something that is within some similar vibration of what you already created. And so what's coming up is the generational cycles relationally that have led to you making disempowering choices. And the way ancestral energy works in your lifetime, whatever your relational karma is, I guarantee it has a generational root. It has a generational root. It is a generational origin of some trauma that existed through your lineage that is now coming up. And so the question is, you guys, so as you're moving into a year 9 and completing karma, what you might notice is you're being asked to complete things that you haven't completed. You might notice is maybe there's men or ex-boyfriends or ex-girlfriends that are coming out of the woodworks. And what's happening, they're probably coming out of the woodworks. For one, maybe they're sensing that something is breaking through inside of you. You're moving into a different paradigm or you're moving into a different dimension. This is what happens where past partners begin to feel in a completely different realm or dimension. You know, when you sort of heal your vibration and you think about maybe an ex-boyfriend or an ex-girlfriend from a year ago and they seem so far away, not to say that you're better than them. It's not saying this from the ego, but what's happening is you have alchemized. You have alchemized the unworthiness, the generational pieces that maybe awoke in that sort of rupture, and you've moved them through your body to move into a sort of a different timeline. When we think about timelines, really what we're dealing with is just frequency and vibration. What we're actually really dealing with is just ways that you relate to yourself and ways that you sort of see yourself. This is all coming up right now. So I want to know if you guys are watching this in the comment section, who really, really struggled in the year 2024? Who really, really struggled in the year 2024? Who noticed all their deepest unworthiness coming up and who noticed maybe all different karma coming up for review, where all of a sudden they were starting to see things maybe, and I would not maybe, I guarantee that had been there for a long time. I guarantee what came up in the second half of 2024 had been there for a long time, but had been sort of dormant. Like you want to, a good example would be like a volcano, right? To the end of 2024, the last 6 months was like the beginning of an eruption, right? So all of this activation in the volcano, you know, underneath the surface was percolating, right? And this is what happens through like a spiritual transformation. You know, it's kind of a gross word, but it's become more spiritually enlightened. Really simply put, what it means is the unconscious becomes conscious. And so whatever came up at the end of the year 2024 had been living there for a long time inside of you. And then it came up. And so I want you guys to know whatever came up in 2024, it wasn't new. It wasn't new. It had been there for a long time. And the reason why, and I hope this might bring a sense of hope and optimism and possibility, that whatever came up in the end of the year 2024, the reason why it was so clear, again, as I mentioned, it's because it was ready to shift. And I'm curious, you guys, for those of you, Robin W put her hand up, and Honey said, me, I feel reborn though. There was so much unworthiness and shame and guilt and self-hate in the second part of 2024. I love how you guys are exactly on the vibration. And I know both these women who are commenting. So I love to hear that you guys are right on the same wavelength and vibration I'm talking about. And so even to that, right, whatever came up the second half of 2024, and Honey sort of began to allude to this, but who has noticed a shift? Now we're heading into what, the third week of January? So we're moving into 3 weeks into the new year. I'm curious, with all that worthiness came up from, say, August 2024 to the end of 2024, who has noticed a shift in that unworthiness? It doesn't mean that unworthiness is gone, but who noticed whatever was there, it's shifting. It's at the very least, it's shifting. It's alchemizing. It's alchemizing. So just post in the comment section with whatever unworthiness that was coming up, who has noticed I feel we're in a new paradigm. Yeah. So, and I'm curious, Robin W. and Honey, for you guys and what you're feeling, how does it feel to claim the reality that is coming through you? To be like, this is source, this is spirit, that I am totally, totally on the wavelength of God's timeline right now. Is that something that you find hard for you guys to claim that reality? Like, do you doubt that reality, I guess is what I'm saying? Or can you claim that? And does it feel really, really fucking powerful to claim that? Or have you been struggling to claim that? Have you countered influences of people who make you doubt what is coming through you? Yes, I feel like I'm in sacred union within. There's space for my unworthiness. I feel it's easy right now. And so I'm curious, you guys, with what you experienced at the end of 2024, does it feel like it's energetically really far away? Does it feel like it's energetically really, really far away? Robin W. and Honey, as you guys posted, does what you experienced, the unworthiness, does it feel like it's a little bit kind of in the rear view mirror a little bit? I feel it's easy and already so I feel like I'm in a relation with God. Yeah, super far. Isn't that fucking fascinating? So do you guys understand that what's happened is you've shifted timelines? Yeah. She says, Honey says another timeline. So you've shifted timelines. And I'm curious with maybe there were certain, and obviously I'm not going to make you guys tell me what these situations were, but whatever situations or maybe experiences or sort of karmic things that came into view in the latter part of 2024, do those experiences seem on a totally different vibration that you almost can't even relate, or you can't even feel or see the person that you were that encountered those experiences? That was an old version. I've also seen the entities come out, like you mentioned. Oh man, I fucking love when. And so, do you guys understand? Do you guys understand? And I'm curious, I'm going to ask another thing. And I don't mean to be disrespectful as I say this. And I'm not going to talk about specifics of this, but do you guys see how global trauma continues? And while we have so much empathy for it, that it also does seem in a bit of a different dimension, that it does seem in a different paradigm. As you see the world suffer in certain ways, it doesn't mean that you don't have empathy, but it feels on a different timeline than you personally. I'm curious about this. Yes, I would never make the same choices in 2000 as in 2024. Yeah. So I'm curious with different global traumas that you witnessed, do you sort of see it as a bit of a different timeline than what you feel personally? It doesn't mean that you don't empathize with what's happening, but it also feels quite different from where you are personally. And you can kind of almost create a distinction. You can create a distinction between what's happening inside of you. And so, Honey and Robin W., I'm curious, what do you guys feel is starting to break through? What do you guys feel is coming as we move into this year 9 and eventually into year 1 in 2026? What do you feel is breaking through? Honey, Robin W., if you guys want to post, if you guys feel comfortable to post in the chat section, what do you guys feel is breaking through in the year 2025? Let's say, let's bring 2025, 2026 together. What do you feel is beginning to break through? What do you feel is sort of next that's coming? I don't watch the news or I'm not up to date with these things. Okay. Yeah. I feel a consolidation, integration, and elevation of intuition. Okay. Robin W., I love what you said there. So, Robin, I'm going to ask you, do you feel a difference between, and so for those of you maybe who are just tuning in right now who missed earlier, when I go like this, what this really means is your trauma is interwoven with your intuition. And really what I actually mean is generational karmic contracts are interwoven with your intuition. And as this separates, so it goes from this to this, this to this. This basically what it means is your intuition becomes cleaner. So you want to step into your spiritual power. You have to separate your generational trauma from your intuition. That's where clarity comes. So Robin, I'm curious, do you feel more of this, Robin? Do you feel more of a separation with your trauma and your intuition? And you're like, holy shit. And you can almost like see Robin W. says yes with an exclamation point. Okay, you guys. So what's happening is we moved into a year 8. And so the crazy part, and I really want to bring this up, but you guys think it's wild how we can fucking track this? Do you guys think it's wild how we can fucking track what's happening? We can literally track the frequency of this shit. We can literally energetically fucking track exactly what's happening. I'm curious, you guys watching, do you guys think it's wild that we can fucking, and I see some people close to me with it twisted up still. Yep, yep. I talk about this, it's about getting it. You start to get it. You start to get it. And if you've worked with me or you've been in my space, then you're probably someone who's going to be totally know exactly what I'm talking about. If you've never really been in my space, you might not know what I'm talking about. But basically, everyone that has worked with me or does work with me currently will know exactly what I'm talking about. That we can actually track. We can track this frequency, right? Which is why when people look at you, they're like, Jamie, you're woo-woo, you're fucking crazy. And it's like, it's trackable. It's literally trackable what's happening. But if you're not aligned to that frequency, you can't track it. So it's the type of thing you get it when you see it. Robin W. I'm holding space, but not getting entangled with it. Yes. In ways, and I don't like this word, but in ways you can see people still twisted up with the matrix. You can see people who are still twisted up with the matrix. And so here's something really, really important, you guys, because this has been a lot about relationships. And Robin W. and Honey, I'm curious if you guys will relate to this. Robin W. and Honey have been interacting with me in the comment section. What's really comes through relationally, Robin W. says, I feel above the fray of it. So here's what I want to bring relationally. Do you guys understand what it's like to be in a space where you can literally observe relational patterns from like a God level of observation? I don't say this through self-inflation of ego, but I say this just of truth, of you can witness, you can put yourself in other people's shoes, you can put yourself in other people's perspectives, you can take accountability for your side. But the question is, how do we move with the highest intention of everyone involved? Right? So to ground this, like imagine you had a completion conversation with an ex. You'd move into a space. I want everyone to win. I want everyone to be happy. I want everyone to be as empowered in their fucking life to move through the evolution. I want everyone to move into their power. And you show up in this space. And what happens is you see people who can't meet you here. You see people who can't meet you here. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? When you're like, how do we communicate? How do we connect in a way that we can live as the highest vibration of source for everyone? So if you're connecting with someone, completing with someone, how do we move into a space where you feel empowered and I feel empowered? Right? But what happens is you see people who are caught up in the fucking matrix. You see people who are caught up in their fucking wounds. You see people who are caught up in their ego. And they can't meet you here. And so this is the question that is going to be posed to you. Can you trust this space that is coming through you and be like, does this person have the capacity to meet me here? And what happens is this comes through when you start to see everything. You see it. You see all the dynamics playing out. You see all the dynamics playing out. You see how people are self-sabotaging, how people are staying embroiled in karma. You see it. But you can't force people. You can't force people to come here with you. This is relationally the timeline that you're being called. You guys, and think about this. Think about how easy can fucking relationships become when you're like, how do we communicate as the highest source of love between us in this situation? But what happens is our real human attachment, our fear, our pain, our trauma, our unworthiness, we drag all this shit and we can't communicate there. But think about how easy it is when someone's able to meet you in this level of communication. This is why relationally, you guys, what's breaking through as we talk about sacred union, what's breaking through is it doesn't have to be so fucking hard. When you're connected to God and you can see it as God and you separate your trauma and your intuition, it can become easy. You can learn it a different way. Because what it means is you're not afraid of your pain. You're not afraid to have things hurt. You're not afraid to be alone. You're not afraid to be, because the ego death that you have died through your own initiation, through feeling the deepest generational trauma that you purged through your body. You're not afraid. You can go there and you create from here. And so you're like, yeah, let's have a loving conversation. Anything you want to talk about me, let's talk about it. I'll take ownership for what I bring to the table. And you can do that when you've died the ego death and you see things. And so the question is, if we were to act as the highest intention of Source and God, what would that look like? What would that look like? Do you guys understand what I'm talking about here in the comments? Of how easy things can become and how challenging it is when someone can't meet you here. But the work is to realize, okay, that person can't meet me here. That person can't meet me here. And as they do, I'm telling you guys the fucking truth. You got to let people go. You got to let people go. And part of your boundaries is going to be able to know, can someone fucking meet you here? Can someone fucking meet you on this timeline? Because the fear's going to creep in. The doubt's going to creep in at certain times. You're going to doubt this world. As we're tracking this frequency and this vibration that I'm talking about, you're going to doubt it. And you're going to be like, maybe I got to contain it. And you're going to get embroiled in those games and don't. You got to be fucking boundary. Because when you see clearly, you're like, I know where I'm operating. And this person can't meet me. You got to let them go. You got to say goodbye. And you got to step forward into who can meet you right here. And as you find someone who can meet you right here, the collective vibration expands. You become a ripple in the collective. You become a new creation, a new imprint. It's like the example is like you're planting the seed of a tree that can grow. And every sort of sacred union that arises, truly. And if you guys realize this, do you guys realize how many people online talk about sacred union? And when you get to this place that I'm talking about, you're like, no, whatever you're talking about, that's not fucking it. And I know because I can see it. I can feel it. It's about twin flames, all this bullshit. It's all this karmic recreation. Because you've split your trauma and your intuition. You've gone from this to this. You fucking know. And you can see when people are like this. You can see it. You can see when someone hasn't been initiated. You can see when someone hasn't sat in the deepest fucking levels of their intuition. You can see it. It's undeniable. So you guys, there's a frequency that is coming right now. Robin W. and Honey, that you're commenting in the chat section, this frequency is undeniable. And so what you're going to see is a split. In this year, 2025, you're going to see a big split. And the invitation is, can you go deeper into where you're being called? Can you expand that vibration and that timeline? Can you make it fucking massive? Can you expand it inside of you and make it so big? And it's going to require you to let a lot go. To let a lot go. And if something feels far away in your past, it's because you have done the fucking work. You have alchemized. You have alchemized something. If you're thinking about what's happened in 2024 and it feels like distant, it feels like you're driving away and it's in the rearview mirror and you can see it and it feels so far behind you, it's because you've done the alchemy work. You've done the integration. Spirit is coming alive in you. And you've transcended timelines in a very tangible way in your cellular body. You've transcended timelines in a very fucking tangible way. Honey says, you can feel and sense people's agendas as I can feel and sense my own. What is in love? What is love and what is fear? That's all there is. Yeah. And you guys, this really does work proportionally to the amount of fear that we integrate. right? So we want to see everything as love. And what happens is people love to preach this. People love to preach this, and it becomes this preachy sort of mantra, but living it and embodying it is a different thing. What it really means is that you have met the deepest layers of your fear, and you have integrated and moved through that deepest fear in your body to be able to move into this sort of godly observation. When I say a godly observation, what I really mean is your intuition is on fucking fire. Your intuition is on fucking fire. When you're channeling God, your intuition is in your whole body. Every single cell in your body and space is on fire with your own inner knowing through your intuition. And you fucking trust it. You fucking trust it. It's this. This has gone to this, right? And you can see everyone who's like this. You can see everyone who's like this, right? Everyone who's in fear, everyone who's trying to control, everyone who's not the fuck alive, everyone who's not so deeply authentic. You see it. And it becomes so clear. And what happens is when it separates like this, your intuition becomes so clean. Your intuition becomes so knowing. It's pure. It's holy. It's like you're downloading ecstasy from the higher realm, but it's totally in your cells. And so as Robin W. and Honey were talking here in the chat section, this frequency that we're talking about, this knowing, you can fucking track it. You can track it. It's so alive. And really what that means is we're on the God timeline. That we're totally aligned to a psychic vibration in the world. And if you're tracking this frequency, what's going to happen is you're evolving with the psychic energy that's all around you. You're evolving with the psychic energy that's all around you. You're expanding with it, wholly and holistically connected to it. That means the secrets of the universe are going to be fucking bestowed through you. Trust it. Expand it. That is God, the goddess, speaking through you. Robin W. says, sovereignty and the oracle, they go together. I can't grip anyone or anything and have access to her. Right? Sovereignty and the oracle, they go together. 100%, right? To move into your full embodiment of your spiritual gifts is going to be predicated off of your own inner wholeness and energetic sovereignty. And very tangibly and simply put, your energetic wholeness and your energetic sovereignty is going to be about completing these generational ancestral contracts. The unworthiness that came up the second half of 2024 was the deepest unworthiness from the ancestral field, the quantum realm that was coming up through you. You're so uncomfortable, so much unworthiness, so you could see it, so it could shift. And this could go to this. And you could begin to step into the path of your creation, of what your spirit's here for. And what that means relationally is moving towards the timeline of sacred union. Everyone loves to throw around the word sacred union because it's sexy. But to actually get to that timeline is the deepest personal individual initiation of your life. And everyone talks about it in a sexy way without really, really knowing the arduous path of generational ancestral completion, generational contracts, karmic integration, fear processing, trauma integration that is required to actually fully embody, get to that timeline. And if you do, you begin to understand this frequency that I'm talking about. And it starts to become like a science, right? It's like when I talk about God like this, it feels like scientific fact in my body. And that's when people don't get it, see it, you're like, it's okay. But your knowing is so strong that it can't be denied inside of you. And you can't have people dragging you into another space or dragging you into another timeline, whatever that might look like. And so if you guys have any questions or anything you want to put in the chat section, or anything you want to sort of say, or anything that feels alive inside of you as we begin to sort of wrap up here, feel free to put that in the chat section now. Any questions, anything that's alive inside of you that you just want to say, Feel free to put that in the chat section. Any comments, any questions, anything, before we kind of begin to wrap up here. You got to trust, you guys, where you're being led. You got to trust this frequency that is coming through. You have to trust that knowing that is coming up inside of you. And if you have had, Honey says, I feel a lot of spiritual attacks right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, as I've mentioned, when you're about to move into the light, that's when the dark attacks. That's when it preys. So understand these attacks are going to test your resolve and your resilience. They're going to test your knowing. They're going to test your boundaries. Entities feeling my light, yes. And so it's going to be about doubling down and trusting the reality that is coming through you. You are literally moving onto the psychic plane and vibration of the universe and how God works in the universe right now. The entities are going to pray. Again, the entities, and I think I'll do another live just on entities, and maybe I'll do that soon, and dark energy, because it's really common when we're moving to the light. And so it's going to be common right now as we're in a year 9, which is a lot of shit's completing. Year 9 is both a death and a revolution, whereas 2024 probably just really felt like a death. This year, 2025 is going to be both. I think 2025, we're going to be completing a lot, but we're also going to be like stepping into unprecedented territory in all facets of our life, and that's going to start to happen. And so we're kind of at the beginning of that. Yes, please, entities live, moss to the flame. Yeah, I will do. Robin W says, I feel the new ground. Yeah, it's like we planted trees, but they're only little whatever shrubs right now. It's like we've started to plant a new garden, right? And it's going to begin to move, and begin to grow, and as it grows, we're going to feel resistance to that in certain areas, right? And relationally, what that's going to look like is probably certain levels of completion, maybe with energetic open loops from your past, ending or completing certain dynamics relationally. What you might notice is maybe you've been through the most arduous levels of the karma, but still some residual karma will come. You'll notice some residual impact from 2024 coming up to be completed. Maybe some conversations that need to happen, some type of maybe new boundaries that need to be established. And so I think really, really understanding what that death/revolution is for you is really important. Like, what are you saying goodbye to, and what are you saying hello to? What is like, what do you feel? And really trust that. Like, what are you leaving behind, and what are you stepping into? Because really spiritually, like, it is a bridge year. It's a death and revolution. And so I will do a live on dealing with dark energy and how to be, because dealing with dark energy is all about energetic boundaries, and it's all about energetic sovereignty, and it's all about the size, the power, and the sovereignty of your energetic field, right? So it gets to a point where dark energy doesn't really fuck with you that much. Like, dark energy still fucks with me, but not nearly as much as it did a couple years ago. Like, you get to a point where it can't really penetrate your field. You know what I mean? And it's all going to be related. It also relates to the particular trauma that we've gone through, because the way we want to look at entities is it's subjective to what our trauma is from our lifetime and our ancestors' lifetime. So the entities will show up in different ways and different capacities depending on what our trauma is, right? So I'll do a live on entities, as I'm losing my voice a bit right now. Maybe I'll even do that next week, you guys. I'll do a live on dealing with dark energy when you're about to ascend. But so you will notice that you will. So if you are experiencing psychic or spiritual attacks,
One way that I am noticing a lot, guys, and one way that dark energy really does attack is in your dreams. So, our dreams is when the veil between the psychic spirit realms and the human realm gets really, really thin. So dark energy and entities typically come through dreams really often. That's probably the main way that I feel entities in my space is through my dreams. And so I can tell a lot what's happening psychically or in the quantum realm by what I'm dreaming, right? And my dreams of recent have been pretty they were really, really dark. Now they're actually pretty light and interesting and adventure-like. Whereas before they were really dark, and that's kind of shifted. They're pretty optimistic now, actually. Robin W says, I wrote an inventory since New Year's of the last 15 years of my major relationships and I brought up material I was ready to alchemize and bring into completion. Robin W, I wrote an inventory since New Year's of the last 15 years of my major relationships and I brought up material I was ready to alchemize and bring into completion. In that process, I had some crazy dreams, dark and scary for the hard part of that process. Interesting. I love that you can, but isn't it amazing when you can track it and you can, when energetically, and when you shift timelines, you guys, like when you think of 2024 and certain things seem really, really far away, I want you to see that as reason to be hopeful and optimistic that you're ascending and you're growing energetically and you're evolving, because when things seem far away, that does mean you've ascended into a different frequency and vibration. So that's an energetic sign of growth. That's a tangible, very quantifiable sign of growth, is when something feels in a different timeline. That means you've spiritually transformed. That is like the number one way to see that you've spiritually transformed. And so when you can feel things alchemizing and when karmic patterns feel really far away from you, it means you're moving into a different timeline. So trust that and keep going. And if something really feels like it's becoming really in the back, that means you're growing spiritually. It means if something was here, it means your frequency is going like that. So you really, really want to trust that. And you guys, we do process and integrate in our dreams. That's how we communicate with the quantum field, the quantum realm. The psychic spirit realm is going to be through our dreams. We are tapping into the subconscious or the unconscious in our dreams. So we're trying to work things out psychically in our dreams. So your dreams will be a huge avenue to what you're trying to work out psychically. And so doing inventory on your dreams and writing things down can be really huge when it comes to like spiritual processing, and entities will prey on us in our dreams if we're ascending into the light. It's true. I could see so much. I'm not that person anymore. So empowering to see that. That's huge, right? When you can feel something in a different timeline, things feel, you're like, oh fuck. Like you can, that's the best way, you guys, because when we think about how do you track your spiritual growth, feeling energetic vibrations, and so when things feel energetically so far away from you, it means you've grown out of that timeline. So like I even think about like groups or communities that I was a part of in like 2018, 2019, 2020, and they literally feel in another realm. And I don't mean that to say I'm better than or to downplay, but it just means whatever my spiritual path is different than that vibration. And so there's a difference. There's a difference of energetic vibration and evolution. And I feel that. And I'm like, holy shit. And when I really sit and feel, and that's why you might notice some people unfollow you on social media or remove themselves from your reality, because whatever their vibration's at, it might be, your vibration might be off-putting. It might be triggering. It might be confronting. So you're going to notice a lot of people drop out of your space who aren't matching where you're going, right? So you really want to find people. And when it comes to a sacred union, you really want to find someone who's in a similar energetic evolution as you. You know, it doesn't mean in a relationship you're going to be this perfect evolution, but so much of sacred union is finding someone that is at a similar spiritual evolution at a similar time. That is so much about sacred union is timing and about finding someone who you're aligned with and attracted to when you're on a similar energetic trajectory. That's so much of what sacred union is about. And you find another light being, another old soul who's on a similar evolution as you vibrationally. And so much of twin flames and karmic spiritual relationships are when we are working out energetic karma with someone where we have a mismatched timeline, right? So what I mean by that is your psychic, your energy is potent, but the human trajectory or your energetic evolution is at conflict with each other. And so that's why the relationship is so challenging, why you're triggering each other, why you're in conflict, because your energetic evolution. And so what I'm proposing here, and I didn't mean to talk this long, you guys, but what I'm proposing here is it can be really, really easy. And so my belief is a sacred union evolution will be really easy. When it comes together, it will be full of levity. It'll be effortless. And and because so much of how we start a relationship is what the relationship is. It doesn't mean we can't change it, but it's really, really hard. How you start a relationship is usually what that relationship is. Whatever sort of imprint, dynamic, energetically that is rooted in that relationship to begin with is typically what that relationship becomes, which is why when the relationship is really difficult from the start, you're usually dealing with some type of karma or some type of trauma bond, whatever it might be. I'll let you guys know this. This is huge. So one thing that I'm bringing into my business this year is I am bringing couples work into my business. But as I say that, because I've been working with individuals through this spiritual process for a long time, but as I say this, the couples work that I'm doing is very, very specific to sacred union and to two people who are being initiated at the same time. So two people coming together who resonate with what I talk about, who are trying to co-create with the divine and God. So I haven't launched it yet in my business, but this year I am moving into couples work and couples teaching and couples healing work together, co-creationally, relationally, and bringing two people who have been individually and individuated and how they co-create and create a bridge together. So I'm doing this couples transformation work, and that's something that I am launching this year. Well, I haven't launched it officially, and so you can't register for that. I'm putting that into the space in the next couple months. That offer is going to be extended out. So just to say, there's going to be a lot more relational aspects coming into my work. As for the past couple of years, so much of it has been focused on the individual process and the individual spiritual process. So the co-creation together, sacred union, spiritual transformation, couples that are creating this new vibration, this new earth in this way that I'm talking about, it's going to become a lot more of my work. Let's say over the next 2 to 3 years, is that really comes in, and couples who are at the forefront of this. So just to put that on your guys' radar and that will be launched when I launch my new website, which look at my website. My website will be launched sometime next month in February, where my website will serve as like a one-stop shop where you can access all my programs, all event workshop information, all the communities that I'm going to start, everything, my website, my writing, you'll have access to my longer form writing, my videos, everything will be on my website. So that will be launched sometime in February. So my couple stuff will be launched when that launches too. So, all right, guys, my voice is completely fried. So Robin W says, when I meet a person who can meet me, it feels so gentle, like we were meeting in the eye of the storm. Yeah. When you find someone we can meet you guys, it feels fucking easy. Like, my God, this is so effortless, right? It doesn't mean you don't have challenges, but it means that you're playing on the same team and you're fighting for the same thing. You're fighting for the same thing, right? And so often the challenges relationally is we're not fighting for the same thing. And when you really find someone who can hold this highest vibration of God, more times than not, because we get triggered, we shift into our little boy, little girl, we can't hold that space all the time. But that becomes a theoretical, aspirational place that we're trying to get to, and sort of a North Star that we want to bring ourselves back to. So Robin W says, I feel sacred union individually and in partnership is the path to healing humanity. Yeah. So I think so much of sacred union, you guys, is feeling real, true sacred union / union inside of yourself first. And the depth in which you feel that union inside of yourself is going to prompt you to the depth of a sacred union that you're going to move into co-creation. And I totally agree. Sacred unions. So everything that I'm talking about, when couples come together who are matching vibrations from what I'm talking about here, this is the ripples that are going to be created to literally heal humanity completely. And that is 100% what's happening. And so if you're on this path, you are on the path of eventually opening up to a partnership that will create a ripple of healing and transformation in the collective frequency. And that really, really is what's coming. That's factual. It's like fucking energetic science. Like, it is happening. So you need to trust it. So, all right, everyone, I'm going to leave it there. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with anyone who you think might resonate. Pass it along to someone who you feel might resonate with these messages. Again, I do these YouTube lives now every single Friday, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I still will launch other content on YouTube, but lives we're going to do every Friday. So Honey said, I'd love that. Healing the world as a team, 100%. So sending love to everyone, wishing you guys a wonderful weekend ahead. And I travel back to the dead of winter in Canada tomorrow. So wish me luck. We tap into and activate the fountain of creation when we come together. 100%, Robin, that is it. So a lot to look forward to, guys. So keep trusting what is breaking through. Keep trusting that frequency, that vibration, that knowing, and step into everything that's coming. I can't fucking wait. Okay. Much love, everyone. And we'll see you next time.